What's up, family? Welcome back to the Stop Sinking Show, where we go from struggle to flow. Today we are here talking about half-hearted harmony. What does that mean? That is the kind of life that you build for yourself when you fail to say no, when you mean no. One of the biggest things impeding us from living an authentic experience is our willingness to design it as such, to design that authentic experience, doing the hard work of actually choosing what experience we want. Most of us stay vague and flailing. Designing our experience means we must accept what we accept and discard what we don't. This is a requirement for authenticity. Or else, what is authentic about you? If the direction of the wind dictates your stance, you being the architect of that authentic structure that is you requires you to be decisive and, in a sense, ruthless, not literally, with keeping what you want to keep and eliminating what, or at least minimizing the rest. Unfortunately, most people tend to avoid applying this to their lives. They may have had a bad experience or have never learned that having a preference is okay, that saying no is okay. Although I never struggle myself with saying no, this is personal to me because I see this everywhere. As adults, the number one thing that I see impeding us from our authentic experience is people learning that it's okay to say no. The reason I got so good at saying no, is probably because of how many times I was demonized for it. My family, or especially my sister, would call me selfish and ask me to think of someone else for once. And just do something for someone else for once. And instead of that making me feel bad and being the bad experience where I never learned how to say no, instead of that making me feel bad, it made me actually turn inward to audit if what I was saying no to was something I was willing to live with. And I was willing to live with the consequences of. Meaning if I had any future remorse or regret, or if I missed out on something from me saying no, would that no be worth the cost? And most of the times, the answer to that query affirmed my decision. It became easier and easier for me to say no, because I knew that I had considered the consequences. And nothing was going to coerce me into an activity that I didn't fully agree to participate in. So as long as you take into account what you give up by saying no and manage your fear of missing out, you will find much greater peace. And in turn, what you say yes to will be carefully considered and right fit for you. This not being able to say no is literally one of the biggest things I see in common with most people. Not having learned how to disagree while remaining harmonious. So they opt for half-hearted harmony. Let's dispel some myths right off the bat about saying no. Because one of the first things when I speak to somebody, what they're essentially telling me is that saying no creates conflict, and conflict is bad. And it should be avoided at all costs. And I'm here to tell you that saying no doesn't have to disturb the peace. It doesn't have to be some grandiose expression or some blow up. Unfortunately, for most people, their memories of saying no has led to ruined relationships. Most of the times because they say yes so often and are so often willing to be trampled over that on that one fateful day when the moon is right, on a certain day when their mood is off, they burn down all the good that they have built up until that point. They burn down all the goodwill that they have supposedly created with them saying yes so often. Because that one day, they decide to stand up and say no. And they don't know how to say no because they haven't practiced it much. They are more likely to casually and so often half-heartedly say yes that it takes such a strong surge of emotion for them to finally share how they feel and say no. Shocking and hurting all those that were there thinking that they were receiving their authentic agreement this entire time. And their authentic care, their authentic love, their authentic help from this person was real because they said yes and they agreed to be there. It leaves you questioning everything that you've ever experienced with a person like this, who reveals to you after saying yes and signing up and having you show up for something that they've agreed to, but it was half-hearted the entire time. And it's not until that day when their mood is off that you find out that it was never a yes in the first place. And then where do you stand with somebody like that? What can you build with someone like that? So saying no doesn't have to be some grandiose expression. It doesn't need to be some blow up. Saying no doesn't have to be reserved for people with specific temperaments, agreeable or disagreeable. It is a skill that you develop and a value you prioritize. Because to you, the alternative of it is a life you don't want to live. Or one day you will wake up in a life you despise but helped create in increments, or helped degenerate in increments. Like a slow choke that takes you 50 years to suffocate to death. Saying no does not make you a bad person. You are allowed to be on a different page than other people. Your only job is to maintain harmony while doing so, which we will get into. All these myths and misconceptions are why many people, we never learned to say no. And we show up half-heartedly. The things that we just say yes to. Not everyone like me being told harshly to stop being selfish would have hardened up. And instead of just folding and bending to the will of others. Instead, most people learn, oh, if I just agree, then I get love. Then this person doesn't withdraw themselves from me. They will like me. Then I get sustenance. Then I increase my chance of survival if I just say yes. Saying yes when you mean no is so loaded with all these needs. Most of the times, we didn't miss learning this lesson because it wasn't obvious to us. I mean, we can literally feel it in our bones when we don't want to do something we agree to doing. But we do it anyway. Because we've learned that saying yes provides a tactical advantage and increases our chance for survival. Because so many people, our caretakers, or just people in general, posit themselves in our lives as gatekeepers to all the things that we want. And we just bend and surrender to them and take what we can get. We just say yes when we mean no. So don't say yes when you mean no. Don't just agree to things when you don't agree to them. Do not do what you hate. Don't play a part in contributing to what is broken. Regardless of what need that doesn't fulfill for you. Don't agree to do something that is not in alignment with your values, with your ideals, with who you are trying to be, clearly with who you are not. Say no when you mean no. Don't betray yourself, or you will live with the knowledge of that self-betrayal for years to come. I'll tell you a story. I was sitting in my manager's office, and right next to her office, this is years ago, right next to her office was her manager's office. Someone who interacted with our team as well. And while I was sitting there having a one-on-one meeting with her, I can hear him on the phone being kind of rude and loud with somebody. And I said to her, I could never deal with that. I could never have him speak to me that way. And she's like, you get used to it. This is her manager. You get used to it. And I said, no, I would never get used to it, because I'll think about it 7 years from now that I should have said this or I should have said that. Your conscience will not let you forget when you betray yourself. When you agree to do something or play a part in something that does not jive with who you are, your conscience will not let you forget. You will fight straw men to correct that self-betrayal in the form of what you should have done or what you should have said for a long time, until you forge the internal fortitude and the means to protect yourself against such future instances. Me, having practiced this for so long, am okay with the consequences of saying no and standing up for myself where I don't mean yes, where I don't agree, where I don't feel is full-hearted harmony. So I'm willing to deal with the consequences of that. And that brings back this necessary skill of saying no and not agreeing to what you don't agree to, because you will torture yourself with that self-betrayal. You can only do what your heart allows. And that is personal to everyone. Maybe she stands up for something, my manager stands up for something in another aspect of her life, and can not have how her manager speaks to her bother her. For me, that's not the case. So my heart does not allow that. Only do what your heart allows. And what I mean by that is also only say yes and give as much as you can give. I learned this story from my mother. I grew up in a country, and I'm here right now, in a country where every time you stop at a red light, somebody who is really, really poor, children often, will come to you and ask you for money. They'll do a dance, or they will be missing a body part, and you can see their visual suffering. And you can usually see their family members, if they're kids, somewhere on the side of the road, somewhere else, while the kids are in the middle of the street dancing. Point is, you will always, if you're driving in a car and you stop at a red light in this country, be approached by someone asking you for money. And many times, they don't ask you for a specific amount, but many times people give. And the lesson that I am trying to explain here is only give what your heart allows. Give what you don't feel extended to give and will think about more than once. Just give and forget about it. The lesson that I learned was, if somebody asks you for $5 and you give them $5, but you think about giving them that $5 10 times, like it weighed heavy on you, versus if somebody asked you for $5 and you gave them 50 cents, but you never thought about that 50 cents, that 50 cents counts way more in the eyes of God for you, in the eyes of karma for you, than that $5 could have ever counted. So only give what your heart allows. And do not extend yourself past the point where you are now going to think about it. Don't be concerned with when you give somebody money, a homeless person in the street, or they're just going to go and take drugs with it. What is it of your concern if they want to ease their pain for that day with your giving and take some drugs with it? Is it the best for their health? No. But it's not my choice in my giving to be attached to the end result of it. Only give your heart allows where you don't mind or even consider what ends up happening with your giving. Give without expectation. Give what your heart allows. It's not your concern once you open your heart and you agree to what you agree to. You can fully agree to it. Not half-hearted giving, because it doesn't count for you in the eyes of God and the benefit of your karma. Say no when you don't think you can give any more without resentment. Giving or doing while resenting is a useless activity, and it doesn't benefit any of the parties involved. They don't get the best of you, and you don't get the entire experience that's meant for you out of it. So you are required to say no when you mean no. You are required to be truthful and honest and forthright in sharing your earnest opinions and acting that way. If you don't like someone's cooking and they ask you, hey, how was that? I've had this debate with friends of mine that will tell a white lie to make somebody feel good. If you don't like how someone speaks to you, if you don't agree with showing up to an event, but you show up anyway because you agreed to it, if you don't appreciate the assignment that you were given in any way, if you don't see that it serves a purpose, if you are being asked to do something that just upholds the status quo but further degenerates the possibility of progress, you are required to say no. You are required to express your honest opinion. As difficult as it sounds, there's benefits to this. Because when you say yes, then it really, really means yes. People and you yourself can count on you and your full presence. When you show up to an event, your full commitment, when you agree to do something and you show up and you say yes. When you say yes, it really means yes, because you have developed the skill to say no, and people can have the comfort of saying to themselves when they ask you something, oh, I know if he or she really didn't want that he would have just said no. So when they say yes, I can really count on it. And when you say yes and you're there, you're fully present. And when you say no, it minimizes your resentment, because the things that you agree to, you really agree to. And when you say no, you don't have to be there. So you minimize resentment because you aren't feeding it anymore. You aren't just saying or doing things or signing up for things you didn't want to do in the first place, because halfway through them, you will probably act poorly. You'll probably be short and impatient and looking for the exit sign. So just say no. You are required to. And for those who think about no and conflict comes in their mind immediately, let's reframe conflict. Conflict is the greatest opportunity for connection and growth. Now, it can tip the scale in either direction. It's a moment in which you can really decide which way the relationship is going to go. You can either destroy the relationship or you can walk out of it with a much stronger bond and mutual respect. This comes down to your communication skills. As long as you have the prerequisite and your criteria for contention, having boundaries around where you stake your values, as long as you are clear on this, and you have the willingness to offer course correction to someone that transgresses, conflict can be a great opportunity. Conflict is healthy. Couples that don't fight are lying to themselves or in denial of their own feelings. It's not sustainable. It's probably a sign of unhealthiness. It's probably a sign of something that's broken. There is nothing too little worth fighting about in a relationship. What you do on a daily basis, your routine, is the bulk of your life, a sizable fraction of your existence. How do you want to be greeted when you come home? What's your agreement on the divided roles in the house? Things like this all require conflict. required discourse, and a negotiated solution. Letting these fundamental things go unmanaged is a recipe for despising the life you help create. So embrace conflict. But that doesn't mean aim to be right in conversation. Aim instead to create a path forward together with peace. Conflict is the greatest opportunity for connection and growth. Another thing I learned in my career, in negotiations, in interviews, when asking for salary, or any points of contention where you are sticking up for yourself, or you are asking the other person to stretch themselves a little bit, or asking them to understand you and meet you somewhere, because you don't just agree to what they have offered you. Shoot for an 11. Your conflict that you are walking into, so you guys can come to terms on some agreement, so your harmony between you is full-hearted and honest. Conflict is inevitable, but in that conflict, shoot for an 11. If you walked in that room before that salary negotiation, before having to set the record straight on something, before saying no to something that they're asking you to do, if you were a 9 in that person's book, a 9 out of 10, conflict can be an opportunity for you to walk out of that room as not just a 9 or a 10, but an 11. You have an opportunity there to handle it with so much tact and with so much care that it strengthens the bond of your relationship. Negotiation doesn't have to mean a spoiled relationship. Saying no and standing up for your preference and not necessarily pleasing or appeasing someone else does not have to mean a negative in that relationship. Conflict does not by default have to take a turn for the worst. It all comes down to the end goal in your mind. It doesn't have to be a self-serving endeavor. So be comfortable with saying no, and let's reframe conflict and never think about it the same ever again. Now, saying no, this isn't a conversation about being unapologetically yourself and being bold and brazen. Saying no doesn't have to have all this drama around it. It's more about learning how not to look at it through such strong emotions, or even thinking that force is required when you say no. We are here to normalize and accept that saying no should not be a controversial topic. You don't have to be a disagreeable person to an extreme degree to learn this or apply it. Even if you are agreeable and it's hard for you to say no, just because you're agreeable and it's hard for you to say no does not free you from resentment. You might be agreeable, but that doesn't mean that you're exempt from remorse and resentment of your own actions when you half-heartedly say yes when you really meant no, because you don't know how to say no or are afraid to do so, because the other person might like you less, or that it might create tension. You are not free from the resentment and the remorse of saying yes half-heartedly and showing up and not fully being there. This is a skill to learn no matter how your temperament is. So do right by yourself so you can be fully present when you do say yes and fully committed when you do say yes to showing up to do something. But it's not about saying no with such force and looking at no as this dramatic thing that only is reserved for the disagreeable people, the people who are really bold and are willing to fight it out. No, it's not a controversial topic. When you agree that saying no is acceptable, while also acknowledging that your relationships are important and deserve respect, you can build in this saying no in a healthy way in your life. You take on the job on how to maintain your respect and place in someone else's heart while declining their invitation or their solicitation. You learn to maintain relationships not on the basis of agreement, disagreeing respectfully while remaining harmonious. Maybe even allowing the other person to see the benefit of your rejection. And even if they can't see the benefit or agree, they remain viewing you in high regard despite the disagreement or a lack of participation in their proposal. So it's your job to do. It means when you first agree that saying no is an acceptable activity, you learn. Poorly maybe at first, to practice the art of communication. You learn to tactfully stand your ground and state your case or preference without stabbing the other person with it. Honesty without compassion is brutality. When you don't like someone's food, and the things I'm telling you to not agree to sound so harsh, but it's because you don't know how to communicate them tactfully. Honesty without compassion is brutality. Just because you are learning to say no doesn't mean you now become someone that's unbearable and who's willing to trample over the feelings of others. Not if you want to live a life that's not in social isolation. Instead, you are required to become a better listener, compassionate, more empathetic, and hearing the other person out that's making demands or asking you for a request, while also working to earn a place with that person in which they themselves offer you the space to disagree. Don't think we can just wake up one day and adjust the quality of ours or harden ourselves in some prior soft spots, some shortcomings, without taking into account the effect that it has on other people. Again, not to be inauthentic to yourself, but if you want to show up in the world as a functioning human that's not in isolation, but has now patched a shortcoming, you are required to integrate this new and improved quality into all your prior existing relationships, with first leaning on the bed of foundation you have created in that relationship that even allows for such a shift to happen without completely destroying the dynamic of that relationship. Again, this isn't about abruptly learning to say no starting tomorrow, overcorrecting and burning down all the relationships you have built up until now. Sure, some of you will need to shed some people in your life because they slow down your becoming. But the majority will require you to develop communication skills that allows this new and improved part of you to be integrated into this new dynamic of a relationship that you will now teach them to accept. You have to teach people how to treat you. But when have you ever learned anything from a mean teacher? One that doesn't connect with you or hasn't built any rapport. You have to teach people how to treat you, but it has to be done tactfully. We only learn from people who not only have built a strong relationship with us, but show us their intention to continue and grow the strength of that relationship. Those are the people that we learn from. Then, with that fertile ground in which both of you have invested interest in each other, you can adjust course towards a pathway of peace that you both create together. This is what happens when you integrate a simple on-the-surface tactic like learn to say no into the complex substructure of your existing relationships. And to be honest, this is the only way to apply this tactic while creating a healthy relationship with it. If instead you use it to destroy your relationship because you've learned this new thing, this shortcoming that you're fixing about yourself, I'm now learning how to say no. If instead you use this new thing to destroy your relationships and resort to some understanding that all the current people in your life are incompatible with this new way of being that you are now choosing for yourself, then you fail to capture the practice, the dojo that are your current relationships. Earth School. You fail to capture all the teachers in this Earth School that are your current relationships and learning how to communicate to them, how to truly shift and be this new person and have them accept it with the way that you communicate. Chances are, if you apply and shift to any new way of being without bringing at least some part of your current life, your current relationships along with you, if you are just starting fresh, you will most likely create the same hell from which you will want to then escape again and burn down and start over all over again. The main point of this is that saying no or anything else that we talk about and being better is not meant to uproot you from everything that you have built so far. It's supposed to prompt you to do the work that's supposed to be done. The work required to course correct the misalignment to your new understanding. When you don't do that work, you just trade one weakness for another. And the work here is to learn how to communicate and integrate that into your relationships. And although I learned to say no at an early age, I didn't have the respect for this aspect of it. I was more on the unapologetic side and led with my ego and said, well, if you don't like it, then so be it. It wasn't until later in my life when the stakes were higher in my relationships. Whether it was a professional one that required tact or it would disrupt my income, or one I had invested a long time into and would just cause too much pain in the aftermath, I learned the importance of integrating my no while keeping the integrity of our relationship intact. This does not come easy, and I definitely got it wrong several times along the way and lost many relationships and opportunities. But it is a necessary skill. Learning how to say no. There will come a time when saying yes or no will define you. When the stakes are higher than just your discomfort or the half-hearted agreement to be somewhere or to do something. Instead, there will be times where you are required not to do things you hate, not to agree when you don't agree, not to contribute to injustice of any sort. So, before the stakes are that high, work out your no muscle. So you have what it takes when you have to say no when it counts. Exercise it on leaf level preferences and decisions before you have to make it on trunk level and root level decisions. Work out that no in a safe zone where you don't hurt something that matters to you, that you regret. And it just creates another bad relationship with saying no that flings you right back into saying half-hearted yeses to everything in fear of ruining things by saying no. Work out that no muscle. I love you all. Nobody knows what's a no for you. And when you say yes, they count on you to mean it. Aim for honest harmony. See you in the next one.